tantalizing. You know, I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Because COVID off.
The clash between Sonny Hostin, Greg Gutfeld, and Bill Maher on national television was less a debate and more a spectacle of ideological demolition, a public unraveling of carefully curated talking points that left one side grinning and the other grasping for coherence. It was the kind of moment that lingers, not because it resolved anything, but because it exposed the fragility of rhetoric when it's built on shaky foundations. Sonny Hostin, a co-host on The View, walked into the studio armed with her usual blend of moral certainty and performative outrage, only to find herself outmaneuvered by two men who, despite their differences, seemed to share a singular goal: dismantling her arguments with a mix of sarcasm, wit, and unapologetic clarity. What unfolded wasn't just a takedown, it was a masterclass in exposing the contradictions of someone who mistakes volume for substance, emotion for evidence, and buzzwords for brilliance. Sonny Hostin's presence on The View has long been defined by her ability to deliver hot takes with the confidence of a courtroom lawyer, her background as an attorney lending her an air of authority she wields like a gavel. She speaks with a cadence that rises and falls like a sermon, each word dripping with the conviction that her perspective is not just correct, but morally unassailable. Her co-hosts often nod along, amplifying the echo chamber, while the audience is expected to applaud her for merely existing in such a state of enlightened indignation. But this time, she faced opponents who weren't there to clap. Greg Gutfeld, the Fox News provocateur with a knack for turning smugness into comedy, and Bill Maher, the HBO satirist who spent decades dismantling intellectual dishonesty, weren't just uninterested in her script, they were ready to rewrite it in real time. The stage was set when Hostin, as she often does, leaned into her role as the moral compass of daytime television. She's mastered the art of turning every topic into a referendum on systemic injustice, whether it's relevant or not. On this occasion, the conversation veered toward the term woke, a word she defended with the fervor of someone protecting a sacred relic. Historically, she argued, woke originated in the black community as a call to stay aware of social injustices, a noble concept, she insisted, that's been unfairly weaponized by the right. It was a classic Hostin move: frame the issue as a defense of virtue, cast herself as the voice of the marginalized, and dare anyone to disagree without looking like a villain. But Gutfeld and Maher weren't biting. Gutfeld, with his signature smirk and raccoon-like energy, didn't need to raise his voice to land a blow. He leaned back, raised an eyebrow, and let Hostin's argument collapse under its own weight. The left's changed, he said, not as a debate point, but as an observation so obvious it barely needed stating. He pointed to the absurdity of protests supporting groups like Hamas, a terrorist organization, as evidence of how far progressive ideals have strayed from their roots. Hostin, visibly flustered, touched her forehead, avoiding eye contact, a telltale sign she was scrambling for a response. Gutfeld didn't pounce. He didn't need to. His tone, dripping with sarcasm, was enough to expose the cracks in her logic. He wasn't arguing with her. He was letting her argue against herself. Maher, meanwhile, approached the exchange with the calm precision of a surgeon. Where Gutfeld wielded sarcasm like a blunt instrument, Maher's weapon was disillusionment, honed over years of calling out nonsense on both sides of the political spectrum. When Hostin doubled down on her defense of woke, Maher didn't flinch. He acknowledged the term's origins, but pointed out how it's been co-opted, not just by the right, but by the left's own excesses. You can call it whatever you want, he said, but we're talking about the radical left. It was a line that cut through her rhetoric like a knife through warm butter, exposing the disconnect between her idealized view of progressivism and the reality of its current manifestations. Hostin's response, a blank stare, the kind that comes when someone's Wi-Fi signal of logic drops mid-sentence. What made this moment so compelling wasn't just the clash of personalities, but the way it revealed Hostin's rhetorical playbook. She thrives on emotional appeals, weaving personal anecdotes into broader narratives of systemic oppression. Ask her about inflation, and she'll pivot to a story about oat milk prices at brunch, seasoned with a rant about injustice in the grocery aisle. It's not analysis, it's performance art, designed to elicit applause rather than understanding. On this day, though, the audience wasn't her usual panel of nodding co-hosts. Gutfeld and Maher, polar opposites in style and ideology, locked onto her contradictions like predators spotting the weakest member of the herd. They didn't need to coordinate. Their instincts aligned in the face of such transparent posturing. Hostin's approach relies on a delicate balance. She presents herself as both victim and victor, simultaneously oppressed by systemic forces and empowered to lecture the world on how to fix them. It's a tightrope act, and she usually pulls it off in the safe confines of The View, where dissent is rare and applause is guaranteed. But Gutfeld and Maher weren't playing by those rules. Gutfeld, with his libertarian snark, treated her arguments like a piñata, poking at them until they burst into a shower of inconsistencies. Maher, ever the cynic, didn't bother with theatrics. He simply held up a mirror and let Hostin trip over her own reflection. When she claimed that nuanced conversation is a form of privilege, Maher's response was devastatingly simple. Reality doesn't come with a prerequisite course in personal trauma. It was a line that didn't just sting, it dismantled her entire worldview in one breath. The exchange wasn't just about woke or political labels. It was a referendum on Hostin's brand of activism. She speaks as if every opinion is a verdict, every disagreement an attack. Her voice, sharp and rising, carries the weight of someone who believes they're speaking for the unheard, yet she rarely pauses to consider whether those voices want her as their spokesperson. Her claim that Republican women fall in line with their husbands to protect the patriarchy was a case study in this approach, bold, inflammatory, and utterly disconnected from evidence. It was the kind of statement that sounds profound in a room full of yes men but crumbles under scrutiny. Gutfeld didn't even need to counter it directly. He just raised an eyebrow and let the absurdity speak for itself. Maher, meanwhile, pointed out the obvious. Assuming half the population lacks agency isn't exactly the feminist flex she thinks it is. What's striking about Hostin's performance is how little self-awareness she brings to the table. She delivers her takes with the confidence of someone who's never been challenged in a group chat, protected by a force field of buzzwords and Instagram infographics. Every segment on The View becomes a stage for her to play the role of moral arbiter, demanding empathy while offering none in return. She preaches tolerance, but practices it selectively, turning every debate into a one-woman show where she's both star and director. When Gutfeld and Maher refused to play along, her response wasn't to engage but to double down, as if shouting louder could make her point truer. The irony is that Hostin's resume suggests she should be better than this. A lawyer by training, she has the tools for rigorous debate, yet she leans into identity over intellect, emotion over evidence. Every topic becomes a monologue about oppression, every question a chance to rebrand disagreement as persecution. It's not that she's incapable of insight, it's that she chooses performance over substance, mistaking applause for validation. Gutfeld, with his knack for turning self-righteousness into comedy, didn't need to outsmart her. He just let her contradictions pile up like a poorly stacked Jenga tower. Maher, meanwhile, treated her arguments like a philosophical exercise gone wrong, dismantling them with the precision of someone who spent decades spotting intellectual frauds. What makes this takedown so memorable isn't just the verbal sparring, but the way it highlighted Hostin's broader approach to discourse. She doesn't debate, she performs, she doesn't exchange ideas, she exiles them. Her rhetoric is a house of cards, built on buzzwords and personal anecdotes that collapses the moment it's challenged. Yet she walks away from every exchange convinced she's won, oblivious to the fact that her arguments are as flimsy as a paper straw in a rainstorm. Gutfeld and Maher didn't need to destroy her. They just held up a mirror and let her do the work herself.